Billionaire pretends to be poor on a blind date. But the single mom's kindness changes his life. The rain over San Francisco came down in thin silver threads, soft enough to mist the windows of the little Italian restaurant on Pine Street. Evan Hale stood outside for a moment beneath the striped awning, watching the traffic lights blur into red and gold. He had spent years arriving at events in black cars and tailored suits, yet tonight he wore jeans, a faded work shirt, and scuffed boots. The clothes felt strange on him, too light, almost like a disguise he had worn too long. Maybe it was. Inside, the restaurant was warm and smelled of basil and baked bread. He chose a corner table near the window, where the rain drew tiny rivers down the glass. For the first time in months, his phone lay face down. His assistant had arranged this blind date after repeating the same line he had heard from everyone lately. "You can build cars that go 1,000 miles, Evan, but you've never let anyone ride with you." Maybe she was right. He had wealth, a company, awards, and a silence that followed him home every night. So here he was, pretending to be someone ordinary, hoping it might help him find something real. At 7:12 p.m., the door swung open. A woman stepped in, shaking the rain from her umbrella, cheeks flushed from the cold. She spotted him instantly and hurried over, breathless. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, brushing damp curls from her face. "My son came down with a fever right before I left, and the sitter was running behind. I almost canceled." She stopped herself, smiling apologetically. "I'm Sophie Turner." Evan rose, offering his hand. "Evan," he said simply, "no worries. I just got here." It was a lie. He'd been there 20 minutes rehearsing his new identity as a mechanic from Oakland who enjoyed working with engines. Up close, she was even more unassuming than he expected. Warm brown eyes, a few freckles near her temple, and that calm, capable look people develop when they've been taking care of others for a long time. They sat. Sophie studied the menu quickly, eyes flicking to the prices, then folded it and smiled. "The soup of the day looks good," she said, "and maybe just water." Evan pretended not to notice her calculation. "Try the ravioli," he offered. "It's simple but good." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but only if we split it." The waiter left them with breadsticks and 2 steaming bowls. Conversation came easily once Sophie began talking about her work at a downtown hotel. "Most days I'm at the front desk by 6, she said. "People assume it's an easy job, but it's really about patience." Evan listened, watching how her hands moved when she spoke. Expressive, quick, unself-conscious. When he mentioned he fixed cars for a living, she tilted her head. "You must have a lot of patience, too. My car makes a strange noise every winter, and I never know what it means." He laughed, a sound that felt strange coming from him. "Patience is easier with machines than people." She smiled. "Machines don't lie." For a moment, he couldn't answer. They talked about small things, favorite movies, places in the city, how expensive parking had become. When he asked about her son, her whole expression softened. "Liam's 7. He loves to draw cars. He says one day he'll build one that runs on sunshine." Her eyes glowed with quiet pride. Evan felt something shift inside him. Sunshine, he thought. That was exactly what Hale Motors had promised. Sustainable cars, hope for the future. And here was a boy dreaming the same dream without knowing the man behind it was sitting across from his mother, pretending to be someone else. When the check arrived, Sophie reached into her purse. "Let's split this," she said. He shook his head gently. "It's fine. Consider it thanks for braving the rain." She opened her mouth to protest, then stopped, smiling instead. "All right, but next time I'll pay for coffee." They stepped outside together. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the street shimmering beneath the yellow glow of streetlights. She tightened a pale beige scarf around her neck, waving as she walked toward the bus stop. "Good night, Evan." "Good night," he said, watching her go. He waited until she disappeared around the corner before turning back toward his car, a modest sedan he'd rented to match his story. When he opened the passenger door, he saw something lying on the seat. Her scarf, forgotten in their rush to leave. He picked it up. The fabric was soft, hand-knitted, smelling faintly of detergent and rain. He turned it over in his hands, then smiled to himself. Maybe this was just an excuse to see her again. But for the first time in years, an excuse felt like hope. The next afternoon, Evan sat in his office at Hale Motors, staring at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. From this height, San Francisco looked almost quiet, like a miniature city behind glass. He had just finished a meeting about solar battery prototypes, but his mind was still at that little Italian restaurant. Sophie's voice, soft and unpretentious, lingered in his head. He remembered the way she said, "Machines don't lie," and how she smiled when talking about her son. It had been a long time since a conversation felt that natural. Most dinners in his world ended with polite laughter and shallow questions about investments. But last night, for the first time in years, he hadn't felt like the CEO of anything. He'd just been a man, sitting across from someone who made him forget to check his phone. That evening, he placed her forgotten scarf on the passenger seat of his car. The fabric still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. He could easily ask his assistant to return it, but that felt wrong. He wanted to give it back himself, to see her again, to thank her properly. As he drove through the city, the rain clouds began to part, the streets glowing amber under the sunset. Sophie was finishing her shift at the Harborway Hotel when he walked in. She didn't notice him right away. She was helping an elderly couple check in, speaking with patience and care. When they left, she looked up, and surprise flashed across her face. "Evan?" Her cheeks turned pink. "You're here?" He smiled, holding out the scarf. "You left this behind last night. I thought it might be important." "Oh," she breathed, touching the scarf. "I didn't even realize. You didn't have to come all the way here." "I wanted to," he said honestly. "Besides, I was in the area." It wasn't true. His office was across town, but he didn't want to leave yet. A guest at the counter interrupted, demanding about a missing reservation. Sophie straightened immediately, calm and professional. The man grew louder, accusing her of incompetence, but she kept her tone steady. "Sir, I'll take care of it right away. Would you mind waiting just a moment?" She worked quickly, rebooking his room, apologizing even when it wasn't her fault. When he finally walked away, she exhaled quietly. Evan had watched the entire exchange. "You handled that really well," he said. She laughed under her breath. "You learn patience fast in this job. Some days it feels like I'm managing everyone's moods as much as their reservations." "Machines don't lie," he said softly, recalling her words from last night. She blinked, surprised, then smiled. "You remembered." There was a short pause between them, the kind that felt strangely comfortable. Evan gestured toward the cafe across the street. "Can I buy you a coffee?" "Consider it. Thanks for letting me return this personally." She hesitated, glancing at the clock. "I've got a 15-minute break." "Perfect," he said. They sat by the window, steam curling from their cups. Outside, the city lights began to shimmer. Sophie loosened her hair from its clip, laughing about how her son once tried to make pancakes shaped like planets. Evan found himself asking questions he usually avoided. What she dreamed of, what she wanted for her future. "I used to think about traveling," she admitted. "But after Liam was born, that kind of dream felt selfish. Now I just want him to feel safe, to know he can be anything. Maybe that's enough." He listened, not just to her words, but to the quiet conviction behind them. She wasn't bitter about what life hadn't given her. She was grateful for what it had. That was rare. When she asked about his work, he stuck to his story. "I fix engines mostly. Long hours, but I like it." "I can tell," she said. "You talk about it like it matters." "It does," he replied. "Every good thing I've built started with my hands." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You sound like someone who's done more than fix cars." He chuckled to mask the flicker of guilt. "Maybe I just talk too much." Their conversation drifted from work to books to favorite movies. She admitted she cried at the ending of Up every single time. He admitted he hadn't watched it, then promised he would. She rolled her eyes. "Prepare tissues. Don't say I didn't warn you." When her break ended, she stood, adjusting her scarf. "Thank you for the coffee, Evan." "Thank you for taking it," he said. "You probably needed the rest." She smiled. "You'd make a good friend." He nodded, though the word friend echoed oddly in his chest. "Maybe I'll see you around?" "Maybe," she said softly. Then she walked back toward the hotel, turning once to wave before disappearing through the glass doors. Evan sat for a long time after she left, watching the reflection of her figure fade into the crowd. He didn't know why he cared so much after 2 short meetings, only that something about her steadiness pulled him in. She didn't want anything from him. Not success, not admiration. She simply listened. And for a man who'd spent years being heard but never understood, that was enough to make him want to see her again. He reached for his phone, opening the calendar app out of habit, then stopped. Not everything needed scheduling. Sometimes, he realized, it was okay just to wait for the right reason to happen. That night, for the first time in a long while, Evan fell asleep smiling, thinking not about tomorrow's board meeting, but about a woman whose kindness had made him feel human again. 2 days later, Evan found himself driving past the Harborway Hotel again. He told himself it was coincidence, but even he didn't believe that. The city was bright that morning, sunlight gleaming off wet sidewalks after a night of rain. He slowed at the corner, noticing Sophie through the lobby glass. She stood behind the reception counter, hair neatly tied back, speaking calmly to a guest who was clearly upset about something. Her hands moved with quiet precision on the keyboard, her voice steady though the man's tone grew harsh. From where he stood on the curb, Evan could see her patience. She didn't roll her eyes, didn't talk back. She simply helped, the way someone does when kindness is not a performance, but a habit. He hesitated before walking in. The revolving door gave off a faint metallic hum as he stepped through. Sophie looked up, her surprise breaking into a small, genuine smile. "Evan, you're back." "Yeah," he said, holding up a brown paper bag. "You mentioned last time you barely have time for lunch, so I thought maybe you could use one today." Her brows lifted in astonishment. "You brought me lunch?" He shrugged, trying to keep it casual. "Nothing fancy. Just sandwiches and coffee. I was nearby." She chuckled. "Do you always happen to be nearby?" "Only when I get lucky," he replied, earning a faint blush from her. She checked the lobby clock. "My break's in 10 minutes. Wait for me?" He nodded, moving to a small sofa near the window. For the next few minutes, he watched her greet guests, print keycards, answer calls, all while keeping that same soft tone. When her replacement arrived, she walked over, slipping off her name tag. "Okay, mechanic," she teased. "Let's see what kind of lunch you think a hotel clerk deserves." They sat on a bench outside the hotel, overlooking the busy street. The air smelled of roasted coffee and salt from the nearby bay. Sophie unwrapped her sandwich, smiling when she saw it was turkey and lettuce. "You guessed right," she said. "It's Liam's favorite." Evan smiled. Lucky guess. In truth, he'd remembered her mentioning it in passing during their coffee chat. As they ate, she told him more about her life, how her mother lived in Daly City and watched Liam after school, how she took night classes to finish her degree. He listened, genuinely curious. "That must be hard," he said. "Working full-time, raising a kid, studying on top of it." Sophie shrugged lightly. "It's a lot, but I've had harder days. After Liam's father left, I realized I could either keep being angry or start building something better for us. I picked the second option." She bit into her sandwich, eyes bright with a quiet pride. "We don't need much, just stability, and a little laughter helps." Her words made something tighten in Evan's chest, the simplicity of her hope. It felt like a mirror held up to everything he'd complicated. "You're strong," he said quietly. Sophie laughed. "Not always. Sometimes I hide in the laundry room at work just to breathe." He smiled. "You deserve more than 10 minutes in a laundry room." "Maybe, but those 10 minutes keep me human," she said. "And anyway, it's where the best coffee machine is." Their laughter drew a few curious looks from passers-by, but neither of them cared. For a moment, the noise of the city faded, replaced by a soft kind of peace. When her break ended, Sophie stood, brushing crumbs from her skirt. "Thank you for the lunch. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Evan said simply. "It's nice, talking to someone who's real." She tilted her head. "Real?" He met her gaze. "You don't pretend. You're not trying to impress anyone." Sophie smiled, a little wistful. "Maybe because I stopped having time to pretend years ago." Evan wanted to say something more, something that explained why he kept showing up, but the words stuck in his throat. She was already pinning her name tag back on, stepping toward the door. "I'll see you around, Evan." "Count on it," he said, though she probably didn't hear him over the bustle of traffic. Back in his car, he sat for a long moment before turning the engine. Through the glass, he could still see her helping another guest, smiling, unshaken by the endless rhythm of small tasks. He realized then that it wasn't just attraction pulling him toward her. It was respect. The quiet kind that grows when you watch someone do good things even when no one's watching. That evening, back at his penthouse, the city lights stretched like constellations across the bay. Evan stood at the window, thinking about how different Sophie's world was from his own. Small apartment, tight budgets, long shifts, and yet how much warmer it seemed. He thought of her saying, "We don't need much, just stability." He wondered when he'd last felt that kind of peace. He looked down at his phone, at her number saved in his contacts after their coffee chat. His thumb hovered, but he didn't call. Instead, he smiled, thinking of the look on her face when she saw him at the hotel. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd find another reason to see her again. Not as a CEO or a man pretending to be poor, but as someone who finally wanted to learn what enough really meant. The following weekend arrived warm and golden, the kind of day that made the air smell faintly of grass and sunshine. Evan parked his modest sedan beside a long stretch of green at Golden Cove Park, and double-checked the small wooden box on the passenger seat. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the toy car he had built by hand, a tiny convertible carved from cedar, polished until it gleamed. He hadn't made something with his own hands in years, not since before Hale Motors went public. Sophie had invited him 2 days earlier, her voice hesitant on the phone. "It's nothing big," she'd said. "Just Liam's birthday. A few of his classmates, some cake and chaos." He'd smiled at the sound of her laugh. "I'm good with chaos," he'd answered. Now, as he stepped onto the grass, he spotted her near a picnic table covered with paper plates, juice boxes, and a lopsided chocolate cake. Sophie was helping her son tie a balloon string that kept slipping from his fingers. Liam was small, with brown curls and bright eyes that carried his mother's spark. When he noticed Evan, he lit up. "Mom, it's Mr. Evan!" Sophie turned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She wore a soft blue sundress, simple but beautiful in the afternoon light. "You made it," she said, smiling. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied, holding out the small box. "Happy birthday, buddy." Liam tore it open eagerly. His eyes widened when he saw the car. "You made this?" Evan nodded. "Yep, real wood. And it even rolls." He set it down on the picnic table, giving it a gentle push. The wheels spun smoothly across the surface. Liam gasped, delighted. "This is awesome. It's going in the fairy village later." "Fairy village?" Evan asked, amused. Sophie grinned. "We're building one after cake. It's a tradition." For the next hour, Evan found himself surrounded by the small, noisy energy of children. He helped Liam and his friends collect twigs and leaves, pretending to be an architect for their miniature fairy homes. Sophie sat nearby, laughing as she handed out cookies, her eyes catching the light. Every so often, Evan caught her looking at him, curious, almost surprised at how easily he fit into their simple celebration. When the other parents began packing up, Sophie called Liam over to cut the cake. They sang softly, the candles flickering in the breeze. Liam's wish was quick and secret. Then he blew out the flames with both cheeks puffed. Everyone clapped. Evan noticed the small tremor of pride on Sophie's face as she looked at her son. Later, when most of the guests had gone, Sophie and Evan sat side by side on the picnic blanket, while Liam built the last of his fairy houses. She handed him a slice of leftover cake wrapped in a napkin. "You didn't have to bring a gift, you know," she said. "I wanted to," he replied. "I used to build model cars with my mom when I was a kid. It felt good to do it again." Sophie smiled softly. "She must have been proud of you." "She was," he said, his voice quiet. "She believed in hard work, not shortcuts. I think that's why I built my company from the ground up. But somewhere along the way, I started letting people do things for me. Forgot what it felt like to create something myself." There was a pause between them, filled by the sound of children laughing in the distance. Sophie studied him thoughtfully. "You talk about cars like they're alive," she said. "Maybe because they kind of are," he said, smiling faintly. "They carry people toward things they love." She turned toward him, her expression gentle. "You don't sound like a man who's only a mechanic." "Evan." He looked at her then, really looked. The late sunlight brushed her hair with gold, and something in his chest ached, an awareness of how rare it felt to be seen without the armor of his title. "Maybe I just talk too much," he said again, repeating his old line, but this time she didn't let it slide. "No," she said. "You listen. That's rare enough." They fell into a comfortable silence. Liam came running back, proudly showing off the finished fairy village. "Mr. Evan, look, It even has a garage for your car. He placed the wooden toy beside the tiny twig houses, perfectly aligned. Evan laughed, kneeling beside him. That's the best garage I've ever seen. Sophie watched them, her smile softening into something unspoken. It was the kind of moment that didn't need words, the kind that quietly stitched people together. When it was time to go, Liam hugged him around the waist. "Thank you, Mr. Evan," he said. "Mom says you're nice." Evan chuckled, looking over at Sophie. "She said that, huh?" Sophie shrugged, embarrassed. "He has selective hearing." "Well," Evan said, crouching to meet Liam's eyes, "your mom's the nicest person I've met in a long time. You should listen to her more often." On the drive home, Evan couldn't stop replaying the day in his mind. The sunlight, the laughter, Sophie's quiet strength. For so long, his world had been filled with noise. Boardrooms, negotiations, deals. But today, everything had felt still, real, and full. He realized then that Sophie wasn't just someone he liked spending time with. She was a reminder of what he'd lost, and maybe what he could still become. That night, he placed the leftover ribbon from Liam's gift beside the wooden car mold on his desk. It wasn't much, but it reminded him of something important. Happiness didn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it came in the shape of a toy car and a little boy's laughter echoing through a park. It happened on an ordinary Thursday morning, one of those gray, misty San Francisco days when the air felt heavy and quiet. Sophie had just finished checking in a group of business travelers at the Harborway Hotel when her manager, Mr. Jennings, called her into his office. His expression was unreadable. "Sophie," he said, holding up a paper, "do you know someone named Evan Hale?" The name froze her. "Yes," she said cautiously. "He's a friend." Jennings nodded, sliding a printed email across the desk. "Apparently, the CEO of Hale Motors personally covered your son's medical bill last month. The hospital sent the confirmation to our corporate account by mistake. Your name was attached." For a long moment, Sophie couldn't speak. She stared at the email, the neat black letters spelling out a truth that didn't make sense. CEO, Hale Motors. It had to be a misunderstanding. Her Evan was a mechanic. "Is this accurate?" Jennings asked, his tone sharp now. "You didn't disclose a relationship with a corporate sponsor. That could create conflicts of interest if they're a client." Sophie shook her head, voice trembling. "I had no idea. I swear I didn't." But her words barely reached him. He dismissed her politely, saying they'd review the situation. She walked out of the office in a daze, the sound of the front desk phones echoing distantly in her ears. By the time her shift ended, the drizzle had turned into rain. Sophie pulled her coat tighter, stepping out into the slick street, her mind spinning. It couldn't be true. Evan couldn't be that Evan Hale, the man she saw on billboards, the one who donated millions to green initiatives. But when she searched his name on her phone, the image appeared. Evan in a charcoal suit, standing beside one of his company's cars. That same calm expression, those same blue-gray eyes. Her stomach twisted. Every story he'd told, the modest apartment, the long hours, the grease on his hands, was a lie. She didn't text him. She didn't even think. She just went straight to the small auto garage he'd said he worked at. The air inside smelled of oil and rubber. A young man behind the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Evan," she said, trying to sound calm. "Evan Hale. He said he works here." The mechanic frowned. "Ma'am, nobody named Hale works here. We don't have an Evan either." The words hit harder than she expected. Sophie stepped back, heart pounding, and before she knew it, she was outside again, the rain soaking through her coat. A familiar black sedan pulled into the alley, stopping a few feet away. The driver's door opened, and Evan stepped out, dressed not in worn jeans or a mechanic's jacket, but in a dark suit and polished shoes. "Sophie," he said quickly, seeing her expression. "Let me explain." Her voice broke. "Explain what, exactly? That you lied about everything?" He took a step forward, hands raised slightly. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to meet someone who didn't see me as a CEO first." "And so you lied to me?" she demanded, rain dripping from her hair. "You let me believe you were struggling, that we had something in common. You even met my son." "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I swear, everything I said about my family, my mother, my past, that was real. You were real to me." She shook her head, anger giving way to something worse. Betrayal. "You think that makes it better? Do you know how humiliating this feels? Every time I told you about my bills, or about working overtime so I could buy Liam a new backpack, you were standing there pretending to understand." "I wasn't pretending," Evan said quietly. "I do understand. I grew up with nothing. I remember what it's like to choose between rent and groceries. But when people found out who I was, that part of my life stopped mattering to them." Sophie looked at him, rain blurring her vision. "You had a choice, Evan. You could have told me the truth. You didn't trust me enough to do that." He took a step closer, but she stepped back. "Please," he said, "don't walk away." "I have to," she whispered, "for Liam. He's already lost one man who made promises he couldn't keep. I won't let him get attached to another." For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain fell harder, bouncing off the hood of his car, the pavement glistening between them. Evan's throat tightened. "Sophie." "Goodbye, Evan," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the sound of rain. He stood there, drenched, watching her disappear down the street, the echo of her words ringing in his ears. For the first time in years, no business failure, no financial loss had ever made him feel so hollow. He had spent his life building a company that changed the world, but in one mistake, he had lost the only person who made that world feel human. That night, back in his penthouse, the silence pressed down heavy. On the counter sat the wooden toy car Liam had built a garage for. Evan picked it up, tracing the smooth edges with his thumb. In the quiet, he whispered to no one, "I just wanted to be someone you could believe in." Outside, thunder rolled over the bay, and for the first time, he realized how far he had fallen from the simple peace he'd found in that park. The rain had stopped by morning, but the city felt washed out and pale. Evan sat at his desk in the top-floor office of Hale Motors, staring out at the skyline that once thrilled him. Today it felt distant, as if every window reflected his mistake. He hadn't slept. His suit jacket still hung over the chair, untouched since last night. The wooden toy car lay on the table beside a stack of reports, a small reminder of a world he'd almost belonged to. His assistant, Nora, knocked softly and entered with a file. "You canceled the investor call?" she said carefully. "Should I reschedule?" He shook his head. "No, not yet." She hesitated, sensing his mood. "She found out, didn't she?" He didn't answer. Nora sighed. "You always thought pretending would protect you from the wrong people. Maybe it's time to show the right person who you really are." When she left, Evan leaned back, closing his eyes. The truth had burned everything fragile he'd built with Sophie, but he wasn't ready to let it end there. That afternoon, he drove back to the Harbor Way Hotel, not as a stranger or a mechanic, but as himself. The lobby was busy, the air smelling faintly of citrus and coffee. When Sophie noticed him across the counter, her smile faltered. She looked tired, eyes shadowed from another long shift. "Evan," she said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "I know," he said, "but please, just hear me out." Her manager glanced over, but Evan ignored the curious stares. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small white envelope on the counter. "This isn't a gift. It's a letter. The truth. Everything I should have said from the start." Sophie hesitated, glancing at the envelope but not touching it. "You lied, Evan. What could you possibly say that changes that?" "Nothing," he admitted. "I can't change it. I can only prove I'm not the kind of man who hides behind what he has." His voice softened. "You told me once you teach Liam to believe in actions, not promises. You were right. I'm not asking you to forgive me today. I just want to do something that matters." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Do whatever you want," she said finally, "but don't do it for me." Then she turned and walked away, the envelope still lying between them. That night, Evan opened his laptop at home and began typing a proposal under a new name. Hale Foundation, a program for single parents in the workforce. The idea came from Sophie's stories, the exhaustion, the struggle to afford childcare, the long hours that left no space for rest. He poured everything he'd learned from her into it. By dawn, the plan was ready. Subsidized daycare partnerships, education grants, housing support for working single parents. The board resisted at first, but Evan stood firm. "This isn't charity," he told them. "It's investment in people who actually build the world we take credit for." 3 weeks later, the foundation launched quietly. No press releases, no headlines, just a small announcement sent to partner businesses and local community centers. Evan kept his involvement minimal, letting the results speak. One evening, he returned to the hotel lobby carrying a folded newspaper. Sophie was finishing her shift. When she saw him, she tensed. "Evan, I told you, I'm not here to talk," he said gently, "just to drop something off." He handed her the paper and nodded to the front page of the local business section. The headline read, "Hale Motors launches support program for single parents. Actions over words," says founder. Sophie looked down at it, her eyes scanning the article. The words were simple but powerful. Real funding, real programs, a tangible difference. Her throat tightened. "You did this?" He nodded. "Because you were right. Words mean nothing if you can't back them up." He hesitated, then added softly, "I didn't do it to win you back. I did it because meeting you showed me what kind of person I want to be." For the first time in weeks, Sophie didn't turn away. Her voice trembled slightly. "You can't fix everything with money, Evan." "I know," he said. "That's why I started fixing with honesty instead." She studied him for a long moment, then picked up the envelope he'd left weeks earlier, still tucked behind the counter. "I read it," she said quietly. "I wasn't ready before, but I believe you meant every word." Evan's chest loosened. "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "Just keep being that man." He nodded, understanding. As he turned to leave, Sophie called softly, "Evan?" He stopped. "Liam still talks about that car you made. He built another one last week." He smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. Tell him I'd love to see it someday. When he stepped outside, the evening sky was streaked with soft orange light. The air smelled faintly of the sea and new beginnings. For the first time in years, Evan felt something close to peace. Not because he'd been forgiven, but because he'd finally learned what it meant to earn forgiveness. 2 months later, spring sunlight poured over the city like warm honey, turning the glass buildings of San Francisco into mirrors of gold. Sophie adjusted the strap of her purse as she walked along the freshly paved sidewalk, a folded letter in her hand. The letter had arrived a week earlier, an official invitation from the newly formed Hale Foundation, signed by its founder himself. Grand opening ceremony, community hotel project. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, was a small note. I hope you'll come. No speeches, no cameras, just people. She hadn't decided until this morning. Maybe curiosity brought her, or maybe it was something softer she couldn't name. When she reached the glass doors of the new Harborway West Hotel, she paused. Through the window, she could see a small crowd gathered, staff, families, and community members. A banner hung near the reception desk. Welcome home. Opportunities begin here. But what caught her attention wasn't the sign. It was the man behind the counter, wearing a simple apron and handing out paper cups of coffee. Evan. He was smiling, greeting guests. No security detail, no assistants. Just him. The dark suit was gone, replaced by rolled sleeves and an easy warmth that filled the space. Sophie stepped inside, the scent of roasted beans and polished wood wrapping around her. Evan looked up mid-laugh, and for a heartbeat, his expression softened in that familiar way she'd almost forgotten. You came, he said quietly. I wasn't sure I would, she admitted. But Liam insisted. He wanted to see what a foundation looks like. Evan chuckled. He's here? At my mom's for now, she said. He's excited to visit next week. That'll make my day, he said. And something about the way he said my day made her heart flutter. As they walked through the hotel lobby, Sophie noticed the walls lined with framed photos, not of executives or investors, but of workers and families. A small plaque read, "For those who keep the lights on and the doors open." Evan led her to the community room, where children were coloring at a long table. The program's running, he explained. On-site childcare, flexible hours for parents, job training. It's working better than I hoped. She nodded, genuinely impressed. You really did it. I had a good teacher, he said. Her gaze met his. For a long moment, neither spoke. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was peaceful. After the tour, they stood by the large windows overlooking the courtyard, where volunteers were planting flowers. A faint breeze moved through the open door, carrying the sound of laughter from outside. You know, Sophie said, I used to think people like you lived in another world, one where money fixes everything. He smiled faintly. It doesn't, but listening does. You taught me that. Sophie's eyes softened. You've changed. So have you, he said gently. You don't look tired anymore. She laughed quietly. That's because I'm working less overtime now. My new position helps. Evan raised an eyebrow. New position? She smiled. Community Relations Manager, here actually. Your HR team offered it last week. I figured I should make sure it wasn't charity before I accepted. His expression lit up. It isn't. It's well-deserved. Good, she said teasingly, because I don't take charity. I know, he replied, and they both laughed softly. The afternoon sun stretched across the floor, catching on the silver keychain in his hand. He turned it over once before holding it out to her. "I wanted you to have this." She frowned slightly as she took it. A small, simple key hung from the chain, engraved with 2 words, "Open doors." "It's symbolic," Evan said. "No more locked doors, no secrets, just open ones, for whatever comes next." Sophie ran her thumb over the engraving, emotion catching in her throat. "You really thought of everything, didn't you?" "Not everything," he said softly. "Just what matters." Before she could respond, the front doors swung open, and Liam came running in, his small backpack bouncing. "Mom! Mr. Evan!" He held up a wooden car painted bright yellow. "Look, I made another one!" Evan knelt down to meet him, smiling wide. "You did? That's incredible." "I built a garage for it too," Liam said proudly. "You can see it later." "I'd love that," Evan replied, glancing up at Sophie. She smiled, and in that instant, the space between them felt full of unspoken understanding, something rebuilt, fragile but real. Later, as the event wound down, the 3 of them stepped outside together. The sky blushed pink above the rooftops, and the wind carried the scent of the sea. Sophie looked at the key again, its silver catching the last light. "What will you do now?" she asked. Evan thought for a moment. "Keep the doors open," he said simply. She slipped the key into her palm and looked at him, eyes bright. "Then maybe I'll keep walking through them." Liam tugged at their hands, and together they walked down the steps toward the garden, laughter floating behind them like a promise. As the lights inside the hotel began to glow, the plaque by the entrance gleamed faintly under the setting sun. Home begins with the person who opens the door first. And for the first time, they both knew neither of them would ever have to open that door alone again. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Midus Stories, where love, hope, and second chances always find a way home.